To earn block rewards from the Filecoin protocol, miners must continuously acquire Filecoin collateral and hardware to grow their mining power. At some point, it becomes a bottleneck, right? Either I always need more collateral in Filecoin, or I always need more hardware, right?
Eventually, we might see it's just like, everyone's like accepting stablecoins or like Bitcoin or Ethereum, right? So the really bigger currency in the long run. But I mean, on top of the economic guarantee and the on-chain refund part, we also see this as a way for people to streamline their user acquisition, user activation operations, right? So that is a specific element that we see as to also be important to Parasail and to all the DePIN founders.
Sylvan, you said something interesting around like communities aligning the repledged assets with sort of like the layer one ecosystem that they're most quote unquote aligned with. I pulled up the stats a couple of days ago, and I think there's roughly $1 billion of staked Filecoin, 60 billion of staked Solana, and 120 billion of staked ETH. I'm talking native stake. Hey everyone, thanks for coming on the Proof of Coverage podcast. Today I have Sylvan and ZX from the founders of Parasail, which is the first restaking layer for DePIN. So super excited to get more into what they're building and what it means for the space and some debates around economic security and DePIN and everything else. So guys, maybe to start, you guys can give a couple of minutes of, just explain your backgrounds, how you guys met, how you guys got started working in DePIN.
Yeah. Hi, I'm ZX. I started working in crypto around 2016, 17, started with Ethereum Foundation, Consensus, ended up joining Protocol Labs and lead the design for Filecoin, and then excited to be working on a new project for the broader ecosystem.
Yeah, I'm Sylvan. I've joined a crypto or like the Web3 industry in the end of 2020. Along with ZX, we've been actually working for quite some time. We knew each other for a very long time. Well, I was like mainly building data dashboards, data infrastructure for DePIN ecosystems. We were kind of like a consulting firm, like an advisory firm that offered dashboarding and data analytics services to a bunch of DePIN projects. And then we started building Parasail last year because we saw this common need and common demand for having this like a shared security for DePIN services, because it's very hard for any DePIN to build up their own demand from scratch. So we think we can borrow the idea of shared security and reapply that to DePIN.
Maybe you could transition, guys, to explain like how Parasail works, or what does it actually mean, Sylvan, to take economic security and use it to bootstrap DePIN demand? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so if you think about like in a traditional centralized provider scenario, right? So in your typical AWS or Google Cloud scenario, they actually hire lots of people. They have lots of funds, raise lots of money for customer support, for refunds, for technical support, and also to for a lot of marketing and PR to tell people that, hey, we are a trustworthy company. You can trust me with your computation power. You can trust me with your data. Promise we won't lose it, right? But since that we are all in this DePIN space, I guess there is something that we're trying to do differently, right? It's just trying to use crypto incentives to mobilize and amass hardware and also service providers to offer the same kind of general utility to users, but it's just through like a decentralized and more transparent way. But in that sense, it's very hard for any DePIN projects to build up their trust or their user confidence, because at the end of the day, they might start very small, right? They're bootstrapping their network. They're not like a Google or like AWS, and also, but the service that they're providing could be actually very valuable. So how do they build up their trust on their users? How do they secure the service levels that they are providing to their users can become a big problem. And that's based on our past experience. That's generally what we see where DePIN projects spend most of their time and money with. So that's why we're thinking, hey, there are lots of economic assets that we can mobilize in the both in the DePIN world and also in the broader Web3 ecosystems. Why don't we accumulate those and get people who are interested in vouching for new DePIN services to come in together, just as the way that DePIN projects use crypto incentives to amass all these hardware and service providers. They can also use the same incentives to amass economic guarantees, right? So people using money, bring down money to vouch for their services. So that's kind of how we think about Parasail as a protocol that helps DePIN project bootstrap their trust on their services easier and more efficiently, right? And the way we do that is through like restaking and leveraging on existing, more established crypto assets.
Makes sense. Yeah, the first time that I had thought about this question of staking in DePIN was when I had met this entrepreneur, this woman named Saruchi, who runs a protocol called Giant in the decentralized wireless space, who I met a number of years back. She was trying to solve this problem around like there's now many eSIM provider or connectivity providers. You can get an eSIM from thousands of different providers globally, but the actual like quality of the connectivity is quite low. Oftentimes the installation process doesn't work. Sometimes the connectivity is just poor, or the speed is poor. And so she designed this protocol that sort of has like an embedded refund or insurance mechanism whereby people can bond sort of like to pools that are linked to a provider. The funds in that pool can be issued as a refund for users if they can verify that they went to this location and didn't get the service that they had paid for. And I thought it was really interesting because it sort of like reduces the barriers to new users going and trying a new service. And that helps like to bootstrap a marketplace when you sort of like lower the activation energy that you need in order to get users to try a new service. And I think it's going fairly well for them. And I think the generalized version of that, sort of what you guys are building is super compelling. And one of the reasons that we invested, you guys started off in the Filecoin ecosystem and have built one of the biggest liquid staking protocol on the network. And so curious, like maybe you can talk a little bit about like how that came to be, how you guys are able to get to such velocity in the Filecoin ecosystem over the past 6 months.
Yeah, so maybe it's helpful to talk about some background on Filecoin first, and then like how we got the inspiration from Parasail from Filecoin. So Filecoin is like one of the earliest DePIN with like a peer-to-peer network with storage providers with lots of commercial hardware and providing a service to the client. So each of the Filecoin miners are what we call service storage providers, right? So by design, Filecoin requires miner to put up some collateral in its native token Filecoin to provide economic guarantee on the reliability of their services. So like and it's actually working, right? So like the service reliability on Filecoin has been like really high. I think it's like 99.99 uptime, right? And then to earn block rewards from the Filecoin protocol, miners must continuously acquire Filecoin collateral and hardware to grow their mining power, right? So like, and that becomes like at some point becomes a bottleneck, right? Either I always need more collateral in Filecoin, or I always need more hardware, right? And so this is like where you have lots of staking, lending, various type of opportunities on Filecoin. And then before Parasail, I think like each of the miners have like idiosyncratic risk, right? Each of them are like an individual service provider. I can think of them as one DePIN on their own, right? And many of them are really large, right? So the idiosyncratic risk, different capital structure, different like operated by different teams, and then like in different places, and then like may have various uptime too. And then so even if let's say either you are users or you are, let's say like user who want to use Filecoin storage, you have to face the choice of like which storage provider should I go with, which DePIN should I go with. Everybody will tell you I'm the best. Right, like, and similarly, if you are a capital provider who wants to provide collateral or who wants to like put money together with them to earn rewards, you also have the same question, right? How do I know who is the best, right? Like, and everybody will tell you, I'm the best, right? So this is kind of like, so that's there's like, I think over 160 to 180 million Filecoin, so depending on the Filecoin price, like value locked in the Filecoin ecosystem as collateral. So that's why you have like many lenders, whether you're centralized or decentralized, before trying to provide collateral to Filecoin miners. But because of this idiosyncratic risk and there's no good on-chain way of differentiating, so like people actually have to like raise money from Filecoin token holders, run some KYC of the miners because of like risk profile and so on, and then deploy that with different miners, right? And I think what Parasail got inspiration from is, can we make this thing truly permissionless? Can we like make people participate in a permissionless way and also have this and give people more assurance when they participate in let's say choosing one of the service providers on Filecoin, choosing one of the miners on Filecoin. So we actually built the first delegation pool prototype of the bigger Parasail protocol, right? To Sylvan's point earlier, we combine these on-chain economic guarantees from like more mature asset with like DePIN services and their proof. One more thing to mention, I think like Filecoin has this other thing that they do. Filecoin does this automatic detection of service failure by the service providers. So like if there's any service failure by the Filecoin miners, they will automatically get a penalty from the protocol itself. So like this is what we meant just now by idiosyncratic risk for like a capital provider standpoint. So then we say, why don't we actually, so the traditional business model is I raise money first and then like I deploy that with different miner and try to earn return. I try to discern which one is good and which one is like not as competitive. But we actually realize we can turn that around and then we say, why don't we make all these miners provide economic guarantee over their own services with their locked Filecoin first. They basically repledge their locked Filecoin to a protocol, to Parasail delegation pool, and then they can provide the guarantee over their reliability of their services. If there's any slashing by the protocol, it slashes the miner's asset first. So like the staker asset is actually largely protected, and then like that remove the barrier to entry by like I need to figure out, oh, do I trust this miner or not? Which service provider should I choose? So that makes a much better experience for user and stakers. And then since then, we realized this is something that is broadly applicable to all the other ecosystem too, as we try to drive user demand and user adoption. Then we build the more generalized Parasail protocol.
Yeah, maybe just like to add on to that, the only difference between Filecoin, like how we're able to generalize the economic guarantee layer for Filecoin and democratizing access so that anyone can become like can contribute their asset to guarantee the storage providers on Filecoin, versus the more general version that we're building is just the execution of penalty, right? So in Filecoin, as ZX mentioned, there's this native way that detects service failures and execute on the penalties. But in the more general version that we are building, we just need to implement that with different DePIN protocols, and that's what we mean by like a universal DePIN proof of service.
Got it. For the perspective, like for the DePIN founders listening out there, which I think is a decent chunk of our audience, like, yeah, they're probably thinking like, oh, this sounds fucking awesome. We have some refunds for like, it's easier to get customers, or we can use security from other ecosystems as a way to give guarantees. What's the actual like mechanical steps to working with someone like you guys? Like, should I think about before my protocol launch, I should think about designing the protocol in a way that has native service guarantees, or post protocol launch, I should think about like building liquidity in these pools? Like, what have you guys seen and be an effective way to work with Parasail coming from the perspective of a protocol designer?
Yeah, so I guess if we want to simplify the project that we're building into like two things, I think there are like two main elements of our protocol. The first is what we call the DePIN proof of service. Essentially, you can think of that as an oracle that just tells you whether a particular DePIN service or like a DePIN transaction has been fulfilled or has failed, right? So in practice, we have like a bunch of nodes and validators that help us to verify the service result of like a transaction on different blockchains. So that we're not being blocked, saying that okay, we can only use the asset from like one blockchain to secure the blockchain, the DePIN project built on top of that blockchain, right? It can actually become like an omni-chain or like a multi-chain thing. So that would be the first thing. DePIN projects, when they want to integrate with us, need to specify what is their SLA. Like in the case of Filecoin, it will just be you need to send me the proof of storage every 24 hours. Right? So that's like Filecoin's SLA. For Helium, they have a different set of SLA. Maybe for IONET, they have different set of SLAs. And second, they need to tell us where can I find the service, what we call like service penalty, or this service transaction. That's usually being published or recorded on some blockchain. It could be on Ethereum, it could be on Solana, it could be on Arbitrum, it could be on Peak, right? It could be on different types of blockchains. As long as we are integrated with those blockchains, we're able to obtain such service penalty. Right? So that's the first part, which is proof of service. And the second part is, what do you want? The second part is the economic guarantee pool. So you can think of this as like liquidity pools that stakers can restake their asset or delegate their assets into this pool to provide such economic guarantee based on the results that's being generated from the DePIN proof of service oracle. And the DePIN project can specify hey, these are the type of tokens I'm accepting or I want to amass to vouch for my service. Because some DeFi project might have their own preference, right? They might want to target a particular type of token, like user of a particular type of token, because they might have more synergy with their services that they're providing. So that's what we think is also like a very effective way to like drive adoption and to acquire users, and not just like they don't have to be limited by their own ecosystem or their own blockchain. So in general, in short, it's just like the proof of service. Where can we see your SLAs? Where can we get the penalty? And second is like, what type of assets are you taking in? And also, of course, like what are some of the revenue sharing? What are some of the sharing incentives that you want to offer for this type of target audience?
And effectively, we are creating in this on-chain way to like make the most out of your token or your ecosystem, right? Because I think right now what we saw a lot is like if somebody needs to BD a particular set of target audience, they may have to talk to them one by one, trying to negotiate one by one deals and see like how much money, and it's pretty much based on your negotiating power. But we are turning all that on-chain, right? Like if you convince people that your service is really top notch, right, it barely fails, right? Like that gives other assets a lot more reason to vouch for you. And then that lets your project stand out really quickly as well. And then like it's also like getting the highest bang for buck out of your token or out of your revenue share from your ecosystem, because now it's an open market.
Yeah, it's like something that's already in practice. We just find a way to streamline it through like the on-chain way.
Makes sense. Because I was just pulling up the stats, and Sylvan, you said something interesting around like communities aligning the repledged assets with sort of like the layer one ecosystem that they're most quote unquote aligned with. I pulled up the stats a couple of days ago, and I think there's roughly $1 billion of staked Filecoin, 60 billion of staked Solana, and 120 billion of staked ETH. I'm talking native stake. Do you have any? I'm just curious if you have a perspective on like, does Solana or ETH make a better staking repledged asset for this type of service, or do you feel like one of them will have better traction than the other, or will it be some other asset, or do you think these are kind of fungible and you're just focused on getting the total number of assets sort of like in the protocol, securing these DePIN services as high as possible?
I think definitely like in terms of like asset value wise, right? Like if you can pick whichever anchor currency, and there's always a mark to market, the higher the better, because from like a user perspective, right? Like everybody say you are the best. Then how do I exactly know you are the best? Oh, look, you have a very big pool to pay out if let's say there's any service failures. And then I trust the service failure is the service transaction, as you mentioned, is being determined in as unbiasable of a way as possible. And so that's one on the first order. But I think like every ecosystem carries its own characteristics as well, right? Like, so let's say if I'm more of like an IoT or more of like a location-based service, then I might favor some, in particular, I want to attract a particular types of like service providers. Then maybe something like Helium's, right? Like might be more interesting. Or maybe like my underlying execution is in one particular environment, let's say in Solana or in Ethereum, right? Like then I may want to do it in a particular way. Or if let's say my focus is I want to get more GPUs, then maybe like I want to accept Filecoin, right? And then that gives people an easier way to participate in my emerging network, in the emerging network, versus like the first thing you want people to do, hey, can you switch over your GPU to my platform? People will be like, who are you? And then what are your rules? And then like, would you rock me, right? It's very hard for me to make that step, versus, hey, you can just put your restake asset first, and then you earn some reward and revenue share, try it out. Then like, that's a lot easier for people to be activated.
Yeah, so in general, we just want to build this marketplace, right? I don't think it's up to us to say, oh, here, like, of course, like every project wants a bigger TVL, right? But as ZX said, there are different characteristics of different communities, and there might be a preference for the DePIN projects in terms of the asset that they want to accept. Eventually, we might see it's just like, everyone just like accepting stablecoins or like Bitcoin or Ethereum, right? So the really bigger currency in the long run. But I mean, on top of the economic guarantee and the on-chain refund part, we also see this as a way for people to streamline their user acquisition, user activation, operations, right? So that is a specific element that we see as could also be important to Parasail and to all the DePIN founders.
Guys, one question I think it would be interesting for the audience that I know something I had to wrap my head around before we had invested is that, like, if you think about Parasail like an insurance protocol of sorts, like we know who the sellers of our insurance are, right? You have miners and you have sort of like these restakers who are wanting to earn yield. The buyers of insurance are less clear though, right? Like the actual mechanics by which a user, let's say 5 years into the future, we have sort of like the normie mass market audience using Filecoin or Helium. Are they going to go like, to Etherscan and go interact with the Parasail protocol, like directly with the contracts? Probably not. Are they going to go to Parasail's website and like after making a purchase, sort of like bundle on insurance separately? Probably not either. Like probably it's going to be embedded in the purchase experience in some way, or actually like owning the customer relationship. And so from, what I understand, you guys are, the end state is sort of like to sell through gateways, right? Like there are these gateways that will sell the underlying protocol services and they can also tap into Parasail as well and sort of like bundle this insurance in order to drive more volume. But I'm curious, like how is that correct? Like, do you guys expect how do you think about the customer acquisition and service piece, I guess, of this like insurance stack compared to the raw protocol, which is sort of like the Parasail contracts that you guys have built?
I think like right now on the contract level, it's like for restakers, like people want meaningful and sustainable yield return. People want like to help all this DePIN to really go mainstream and be useful to generate actual paying demand, right? So like they mainly get two streams of reward. One is this revenue share from like users' payment for using DePIN services, and then two is maybe the DePIN project would, as they create this economic guarantee pool, they might introduce some of their own tokens as well as like rewards, right? So like on a protocol level, then if it's just revenue sharing from like the services payment, then like it can be abstracted away like in whichever format that is better UX on like a front end or like the web UX perspective. But then under the hood, it's still like the so-called purchaser of this like guarantee is like it's already implied in the service payment, right? Just like similarly to like how big of an economic guarantee pool a service can really get, I think ultimately, fundamentally, it depends on how reliable the service is, right? Like if my service is like 99.99% reliable and it's like tried and tested, right? Like, I mean, 99.99 isn't very high, but like let's say many, many nights afterwards, right? Like then it's like there's practically almost like very little risk for the asset for restate asset to participate in the economic guarantee pool, and that is a very strong signal to users, right? Like users are more comfortable using them, and then they pay to use them, and then like this, it's a market, right? If it's like at some point the return is not attractive enough, the staker might pool their asset, and then this will shrink, and then this whatever service payment the DePIN services receive and share with the stakers, the remaining staker get a bigger share, right? So then like you actually let this market like equilibrate based on the actual service quality of the DePIN.
And also just in terms of user experience, we do believe that in the long run, if you are able to get a refund versus like you're trying out some service that does not carry a refund, in the long run, the refund one will win, right? Because it just offers people more guarantee, just offer people more confidence in using their product. So that's kind of like our long-term philosophy and thesis here. And if we are actually able to achieve that, then Parasail becomes, one of the most important steps for DePIN and for decentralized services. That's what our goals are.
Makes sense. What does the Parasail protocol look like from, say, again, fast forward 5-10 years, and there's this massive insurance pool, it's diversified across multiple repledged assets. So you have Solana and Bitcoin and Ethereum and others in there, and also diversified on the, many different types of DePIN service contracts that have sort of integrated, and you're able to provide guarantees based on finality for them. At that point, like what does the Parasail, say theoretically Parasail has the network has a token at that point, which is used for governance and for other reasons. Like what does that token look like, or how would you describe sort of like the state of the network at that point in time, where you have these like, massive pool of on-chain assets, but also liabilities in the sense of these service contracts?
Yeah, so I guess like before actually talking about the token, we can envision a bit about like what the product might look like 3 to 5 years from now. So if we if we really become very successful in building out the network, in building out integration with various DPINs, and also in the DePIN projects are very successful, right? They're able to acquire lots of users. They're able to get lots of paying customers, and there are a strong stream of revenue inflow that supports the fundamental values of all these like DePIN networks. I think that would be the what we think would be the very ideal situation. So for Parasail, at that point, I think we will be like pretty smooth, like combined with all these DePIN projects, and we are essentially their staking layer, right? Because we provide the guarantee, we provide the security to their services. And then gradually, when they become very successful, they will commit back their own tokens back to the Parasail protocol and use that token to secure emerging DePIN at that point. So that's like the first thing I would describe like what we see 3-5 years from now. It's like we kind of build this unifying, or it's like an interconnected DePIN ecosystem where DePIN tokens, DePIN resources are shared among various DePIN ecosystems, and it's very easy for any DePIN network to bootstrap their network and build trust among their users efficiently. So that's like the number one thing. And second thing is just like by that time we will actually have we are a place where people can look up all kinds of data for DePIN, right? Because essentially, if you're thinking about like uptime, I can just give you very loose SLAs and my service will never fail. But it could also be the case that if I'm actually giving you very loose SLAs, I'm going to lose in the battle or the war of acquiring users. That's just going to, everything is going to reflect in the economic pools that we are seeing for all these DePIN projects. The TVL of those pools are kind of similar to a vote or like a user, like a reputation that's being put up by all this user with their money. So we think of that as a potential way to help build up real reputation, right? It's a reputation that goes beyond just like how much money is they're backing up the services, but in terms of building up the brand, building up the real trust among users, and even if their TVL drops a little bit, right, people would be too worried about it. So that's another way for us to kind of unify the reputation system for the DePIN ecosystem. And the third thing is just like user confidence. I think that's something that's the most important. We think eventually all DePIN networks need to drive demand. They need to provide confidence among their users when using their networks. And then what we do is like we come in as like a third party. We're connecting all these like various DePIN products, and we're offering like third party confidence and third party guarantee to all these DePIN projects. And from the user's perspective, they're just like getting a very standardized and unifying like experience. There will be no difference for them to use a very established DePIN project versus like using a emerging DePIN project. They're more willing to try and trust the DePIN services that are emerging. So I think those are the key things that we're looking for in like 3 to 5 years. Like if we're able to achieve that, then definitely I think there will be tremendous value for this product as well.
You mentioned at the beginning there, sort of describing Parasail 5 years forward as this like integrated or a staking layer across many different DePINs. I'm curious if you guys have a view. Do you think that DePIN staking, although it's different than sort of like layer 1 staking that we're used to in proof of stake networks, but do you think we'll see a similar dynamic as what we saw with broader Ethereum community and Lido, where basically there was this backlash 2 years ago now, maybe around concentration of stake and sort of like basically raising the potential that liquid staking providers at some scale become parasitic to the underlying network, or potentially can become parasitic depending on how they're governed, or at least add incremental, sort of like centralization risk vectors that weren't there before. Do you expect something like this to happen for Parasail? Like, is there a point where Parasail gets so big that the DePIN start to worry about their, sort of like sovereignty or their ability to keep service providers on board, or any other concerns? I guess like what risk would you be thinking about as a DePIN founder thinking far ahead about integrating with Parasail?
Yeah, I think eventually the most important thing for DePIN is still its hardware and it's still the service that they provide. Right? I mean, ultimately, DePIN projects are not proof of stake networks. Where proof of stake networks, I think by definition, the security comes from a diverse distribution of their tokens, the diverse a profile for their holders, and also very strong token value, right? I think essentially that's where the security of POS networks come from. And but on another hand, for DePIN, I think their value comes from, or their security comes from a robust hardware and provider network. I mean, are there many people here to provide you with that? So think about it. Even if we have like a very diverse token holder profile for one DePIN network, but the actual size of the DePIN network is shrinking, right? There are just fewer providers, fewer hardwares being plugged into the network and offering services, and the revenue is declining. I mean, I wouldn't think that would be like a very robust or like very secure network either. Right? So what we are trying to do is really try to find some ways to help DePIN projects scale their services more efficiently. So to some extent, I feel like we actually provide more help in terms of like decentralization and in terms of robustness of DePIN networks versus like we become this centralized, like we become too much of a centralization where we could become like a point of failure for all DePIN ecosystems. So I think there is a fundamental different thing between a POS network and a DePIN network. Maybe ZX can add something.
Yeah, maybe to just recap, I think like in the Lido's case, in Ethereum case, it's like liquid staking when it became so successful that like people don't run individual validators, right? Like if people are just gonna put my money and then like into one of these pools and then they run validation for me. But then like if one of them has some issue and then like that affects the stability and security of the network, right? But I think that's actually, to Sylvan's point, like because for DePIN you're providing services, and I think it's to the contrary, right? It's like I think Parasail with all this like allowing different real estate asset to participate in other DePIN networks, you're actually reducing the barriers to entry because we have been in the Filecoin space for a very long time, right? Like if we need both stake and hardware, that's a higher bar, right? But let's say, right, like because either I have stake or I have hardware, right? It's very rare that I have both, right? Like and then when you actually allow people like easier access to your network and providing and guaranteeing your service on your network and also earning some reward because they contributed, they lend trust to the service, that's actually making it more decentralized, making it easier to participate. And then what Parasail is really providing or what we are really building is just an infrastructure to allow that, right? Like and sure, people can say after a while I can have it on my. If people think this is like we rather not go through the platform, they can technically people can do that, right? Like technically people can just say, in my protocol design, I just natively accept other token and natively implement my own SLA. But then like it's just that like as we build a generalized version and we build like a scalable infrastructure, it just makes more economic sense and also makes more sense from a go-to-market standpoint because of the network effects to build with Parasail. But for us, it's really just an infrastructure.
The comment on Filecoin, you guys were in that ecosystem much earlier than I was, but I can't tell you how many pitches I had from like investment firms who were starting their, like a private credit, like Filecoin lending arm. Like we must have met at least like 10 different of those of like little, centralized off-chain businesses trying to just like scrape together a couple $1 million or $10 million to do this Filecoin, like repledging and get miners collateral. It's a really, really hard problem to solve. And I sometimes wonder like how different would Filecoin be today if this sort of like existed on chain from the very beginning as part of the core protocol. Certainly a lot more capital efficient and likely faster growth. I'm curious to ask you guys any war stories from the Filecoin days or anything you can tell our DePIN listeners and anything that's not public that would be cool stories for our audience around, I don't know, anything that happened in the Filecoin ecosystem in the early days.
Yeah, I think technically it's public, but public information may not be very common. So I think like before, I think Filecoin was designed this particular way for, I think also it's also based on like the market and circumstances that it was in, like when it was launching, right? You have many very enthusiastic miners, and then like people may or may not be like as long-term aligned as possible, right? Like so, and what brought us into building on Filecoin in the very beginning is we do believe, as I think many other DePIN builders too, right? For Web3 to be successful, and we need like deliver real utility to real users, right? Like, and that has been like the ethos of the Filecoin ecosystem as well. But like, I think everybody who try acquiring pay user in the Web3 space and tell you getting paying customer is hard, right? Like, and that's kind of like, and then not only that, but also aligning your ecosystem for the long term, right? Like given the market dynamics, the broader market dynamics that we are in, right? Like, so I think that was the initial reason, why the Filecoin protocol designed in a certain way, right? Like the Filecoin stake is required to secure the consensus, it's required to provide guarantee on the storage reliability. And then another fun fact too, I think like in hindsight, we are reflecting on this, it's like Filecoin is probably one of the earliest networks that try to bring this idea of a DePIN SLA. Right, like, and then it required its own token deposit for this SLA enforcement, right? Like, so that's actually designed for a reason, right? Like, and now we are basically taking a lot of the lessons that we learned, and then a lot of the in both building an ecosystem and also in like acquiring paying customer, and then we try to generalize that into a protocol that benefits everyone.
Yeah, because if you think about it, Filecoin actually had a really successful token, a really successful like storage network, right? So they're I think today they are still the largest storage network in the world. So that's I think very remarkable success, very incredible success. But it's just like not every DePIN project can start off as Filecoin that raised like hundreds of millions of dollars with lots of support, like everyone is supporting them and trying to help market this token. We're just trying to build something that makes it easier for a new DePIN projects to boost that and build confidence among their users for their services.
Makes sense. So on your guys' site now, and I see the Filecoin vault, and I see two blurred out vaults that say coming soon that look like blurred IONET and Helium logos. Just curious, any news that y'all can share about like what's coming next for the protocol or stuff that you guys are working on behind the scenes?
Yeah, so in terms of the roadmap, we are just deploying a few like actual pools that's providing ways that enables people to delegate their tokens in Ethereum, in Solana, in Arbitrum, IOTX. So there will be more delegation pools that comes in. The second part is that we have already announced lots of DePIN partnerships with like very leading and very promising like DePIN projects. They are building all kinds of networks, and we're very impressed by the networks and projects that they're building. And they are also very solid in the Parasail vision and how we can help them to provide this extra layer of economic guarantee to their users, and also we can help them acquire user and provide demand side incentives more efficiently. So people can expect there will be more DePIN projects to start offering their economic pools on our website and on our application. So that will be a way for users in different blockchain ecosystems, different major token assets to interact with these DePIN projects that are building up their network and offering some incentives to attract these restakers to provide the economic guarantee. That's a way that actually I don't think anyone has done it before, right? So we're really happy to be the pioneer in this, to be the first protocol to provide this token to DePIN network interaction for our users.
Amazing. Thank you guys both for coming on. Anything else you want to leave our audience with? The one thing I'll say, you can, for anyone listening, you can find these guys at parasail.network is the URL. Yeah, guys, I'll give you a minute for any last words that y'all want to get in.
Yeah, I think we are very excited to bring all these DePIN services together. I think like for asset to participate outside of the immediate ecosystem. And I think that's something that like we were not as as a broader ecosystem, we haven't been able to do as much. But if you are a project out there, whether you are a DePIN project, restaking project, or like any other project that you can see a synergy with us, please feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thanks guys so much.
Thanks for listening to the Proof of Coverage podcast. We'll be posting one new episode a week on Mondays, interviewing the best DePIN and crypto founders out there. If you like this episode, please follow us on Twitter or X at CoverageProved or on any major podcasting platform. Thank you.